Sudan's transitional government put to the test. The army says it quashed what it calls a rebellion by former forces. It all started with the plan to restructure the intelligence services. So what does it mean for Sudan's transition to civilian rule? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Richelle, Carey. It was a brief confrontation between what's seen as Sudan's old guard and the new administration. Yet the revolt from within the ranks of the security services posed a major challenge for the transitional government. Members of a disbanded intelligence unit were angry at the terms of their dismissal. They played a large role in cracking down on the nationwide protest against President Omar Al Bachir that started in December of 2018. Fighting broke out on Tuesday in the capital, Khartoum, and the city's airspace was briefly closed. The unrest ended when the security agents surrendered. Heba Morgan reports from the capital, Khartoum.
Cautiousness can be felt around Khartoum on Wednesday morning following the events of Tuesday, despite the fact that the country's Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok and the head of the Sovereign Council Abdel Fattah Burhan coming out and giving press statements to try to assure the citizens that all is well and that everything is under control. Now let's go back to what happened. What we do know is that the operations unit from the General Intelligence Services, who have rejected a severance package following who were given options to either retire or join the military and the rapid support forces, and who have opted to retire, have rejected a severance package that were offered to them, saying that this is not what they were promised and it was dissatisfactory. Now the shooting went on between the armed forces and the General Intelligence Services operations unit for more than 12 hours, and the government said that at least 2 soldiers have been killed and several civilians as well, and that there were dozens who have been injured, caught in the crossfire between the government soldiers and the operations unit from the General Intelligence Services. But people are asking, why was a unit that was dissolved months ago still armed? And the question is, why did it take so long for them to be paid out? Now, the government has said that they have indeed released the money, and the people who have taken arms yesterday say that the money that they were given is not the money they were promised. So people are asking, where did the money go? And how high up was this game that played out involved? Who was involved at high level? Because they say that it happened in various parts of the capital, and therefore it needed a coordination at high level. So lots of questions have come out following the events of Tuesday, and lots of cautiousness, and people are saying that they are worried that the security system in the country still needs further reforms for them to be able to feel safe. Heba Morgan for Inside Story.
Reforming the intelligence unit was a key demand of those who protested against Omar Al Bachir. The demonstrations were sparked by soaring bread prices and escalated into large anti-government rallies. Al Bachir was overthrown by the army in April, and a military council was formed to rule until elections were held. But this was rejected by protesters who demanded power be handed to a civilian government. After months of negotiations, the army generals, opposition, and protest groups all agreed in July on a 3-year power-sharing government. Let's bring in our guests now in Khartoum via Skype. We have Sudanese filmmaker and activist Hajooj Kuka. In Medford in the U.S. state of Massachusetts, we have Alex Waal. He's the executive director of the World Peace Foundation at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. Welcome to both of you. We appreciate it so much. Hajooj, I'm going to start with you. This rebellion, this confrontation, did it surprise you?
Very, very. I started my day really quiet, and midday we were just driving in downtown Khartoum in a very high-end area. And suddenly we started seeing like armed men with civilian clothing walking around with Kalashnikovs, and they started shooting in the air. And it just was such a surprise. The person I was driving with was so shocked to the point she stopped. She went down in the wheel, and we hit the car in front of us. So it was such a shock to be like, what is happening? What's going on? It was definitely not expected.
How did this play out for you as you were there?
We ended up being in this traffic jam. The national security, what they did is they blocked the main road in Khartoum, the airport road, and we were in another main road, and it was blocked. They started burning a tire, which is we as activists were doing during the revolution, burning tires and whatnot. So they had the tire burn to block the street. So it was suddenly like the flames were going up and fire, like they were shooting in the air. So it was like a moment of like not knowing what's happening and trying to get on social media and stuff and trying to figure out what happened. And it took a while before we realized what happened, because in the beginning there was a lot of rumors and people trying to speculate and figure out who are these people and what do they want? Is it a coup? What's happening? What's going on?
So when you say that this violence, this eruption of violence was a surprise, how would you describe the atmosphere, what it's been like in Khartoum? Has it been relatively calm? Do people feel mostly safe?
Yeah, it's been really calm. Most of the military appearances had been removed from Khartoum. So it's been a couple of weeks where we've been really calm. Things are chill. There's not that many armed forces. So suddenly to see that during the day, and then at night to have actually heavy artillery being fired all throughout the night. So it was such a big surprise.
Okay. Alex, I'd like your take as well. This type of confrontation between the forces that are basically being told to leave, was something like this expected, or should it have been expected at some point?
Some sort of resistance by the elements of the security forces that were being disempowered and disbanded at some point was certainly going to happen. When the Prime Minister, Abdullah Hamdok, took the job 6 months ago, he identified 3 priority actions. The first was the economy. The second was peace with the rebels in Darfur, South Kordofan, and Blue Nile. And the third was security sector reform. And that was always going to be the toughest one, because Sudan's security sector is huge. It has many, it's a hydra. It has many different elements. There's the army, the national intelligence and security now under reform, the rapid support forces, and a dozen or so other paramilitaries. And not only are they huge, but they're also deeply embedded in commerce. They run their own companies. They have their roots and their fiefdoms. And getting on top of this was going to be the single biggest challenge for a civilian government, because they really, they don't know these people very well. They don't have much control or authority over them. They don't have the resources with which to offer them alternatives. So regardless of what may have been the political motives of the people who staged this rebellion, mutiny, there were all sorts of commercial, livelihood, socioeconomic reasons why members of the outgoing security forces might want to make a fuss, might want to resist and rebel.
And might not want to go quietly. As Arhiba Morgan was mentioning in her report, some people have questions of how something like this was allowed to happen. Why were these outgoing NIS people, why were they still armed? I mean, what does it say to you about how this played out?
I think disarming organized units in a country like Sudan is extraordinarily difficult. So I don't think we should be pointing a finger and saying there's been a major failure here. This was always going to be a very long-term job of getting on top of the national security operational units and all sorts of other paramilitaries throughout the country. And of course, the forces who are going to do this are themselves not entirely united. You have the Sudan Armed Forces, and then you have the most powerful and capable group in the country, the Rapid Support Forces, who are drawn from paramilitaries, principally from Darfur, who are loyal to General Mohammed Hemeti Dagalo, who is the second in charge of the military establishment and the real strongman, the sort of the counterpart of the civilian prime minister. And the question of who would actually do the disarming is going to be a very tricky one, because whoever does that is themselves going to become extraordinarily powerful. And we wouldn't want to see a situation in which let's say the rapid support forces themselves do forcible disarmament and then accumulate the power that comes from that. So it's a really tricky political tightrope, as well as an enormously complex institutional process to go through. And I'm afraid we can expect to see more incidents like this as it unfolds.
Hajooj, the NISS, as you know, it's been disbanded. They're reforming it, whatever word you choose to use. Obviously, they were key in trying to crack down on the protesters who wanted Omar Al Bachir gone. Do you think that there's any type of accountability that needs to be put to some of the people that were part of the NIS going forward? Does that play a role in the transition that Sudan is trying to make?
Okay, so I was arrested by NIS, and I was placed in an area in a cell that we call the freezers, and basically we have a group. It's like a WhatsApp group and whatnot. And this is one of the biggest things we're talking about. It's like, can we get our rights? Can we go to court? Can we have them held accountable? We got tortured. We got beaten. We were jailed without reason. So it was like, we have all these things we want to take them to court with. Can we or can't we? And this is the biggest question that we have, and we were trying to see how we can start that process. So truthfully, within our group, what we're talking about is not reform. We do not believe in reform of NIS. We totally believe in restructuring of NIS. So the discussion of reform and whatnot to us is like, this force was created by the previous regime. It was chosen very closely for them to do something that we don't think that they can move on and become the intelligence force, intelligence body of democracy. So to us, reform is not going to happen. And this is why when this happened and they came out and the fighting started, a lot of people in the street were happy that, okay, now instead of trying to reform them, we can just get rid of them and we can just totally dismantle this group. And this was the chance for us to do it. So now there's a lot of people in the group, in the street, and in different the community of resistance of Sudan, where like the discussion started about how do we dismantle this group? We don't want them anymore. It's obvious we can't trust them, and for them to be an intelligence group and for them to do what they did yesterday in the middle of the city and endanger so many civilians, they cannot stand anymore. So we're really talking about restructuring now.
Let me ask you about something that Alex just mentioned. You know, the time like this when you're trying to make this significant transition that Sudan is trying to make, this is a really precarious time. Are you concerned about, and you say that you want NIS gone, are you concerned about maybe just shifting power from them to another structure?
I mean, Alex talks about the Rapid Response Force, which is the force that were the main force behind dismantling and the massacres of June 3rd in the sit-in. They played a big role in the genocide in Darfur. So definitely it's a group that they don't have the trust of people in Sudan, be it in Darfur or in South Kordofan or any place that they actually operated. So for us, this is a big thing. How do you move forward and restructure the whole army? How does the Rapid Response Force just becomes a part of the army, which is going to be the biggest battle we move forward? I mean, and you talked earlier about accountability. Like, are they going to be held accountable? Can they be held accountable? The biggest problem with Hemeti isn't just he has a position. It's not like he's just a general. It's like he has this unit, which is a militia. So his brother is the right hand. His cousins are the ones leading it. So the Rapid Response Force is actually his tribe and his people around him. So it's not a real professional unit within the army, which it needs to be. So to get that reform is going to be the biggest challenge. But for now, to get rid of NIS is a big thing.
Alex, you mentioned to our producer that you saw that what you said about NIS, that basically you think people now see what some of you all have been talking about based on their actions. You said that this had sort of perhaps a unifying force for a lot of different groups out there. How so?
I think that what the current events do is they will generate a political demand, and I think we see this very clearly, for a thorough overhaul of the entire security sector. And that goes beyond the three groups that have been mentioned as well: the Rapid Support Force, the Sudanese Army, and the National Intelligence, which is under some process of restructuring even now, only incompleted. But there's a host of other paramilitaries, all of which have their local fiefdoms. They are deeply embedded in the commercial sector. They control key companies. So it sort of unearthing all their networks that have been established over many years is both essential but also extraordinarily complicated, and it's probably the toughest political challenge, because if not done right, we will see possibilities of fights among these groups, resistance and attempts to derail the transition, or indeed in some places maybe even a breakdown of governance capacity, perhaps in some rural areas. So the demand for democratization, for accountability, for justice, for calling to account the members of these security forces who've committed atrocities is absolutely essential. But it has also to be pursued in a sufficiently organized way that some success can be obtained.
Alex, the U.S. does have a special envoy on Sudan, David Booth, an American diplomat. What role has the U.S. played in helping to steady Sudan? What role should they be playing in helping to steady Sudan?
The most important thing that the US can do is lift sanctions immediately and unilaterally, which will put in the hands of the civilian Prime Minister, Abdallah Hamdok, the essential tool he needs, the financial, economic tool, so he can begin to satisfy the legitimate demands of the people for a better life. But also it means that he can begin to dismantle this shadow world of crony illicit capitalism that has grown up around the intelligence and security forces. While Sudan remains under sanctions in this way, licit, legitimate commerce cannot prosper. The Sudanese will not be able to get their economy to recover. And the grip on the economy will be maintained by some of the captains and colonels of NIS, the family of Hemeti and their commercial empire, and indeed the companies associated with the military. So the US simply, the one big thing they should do is not drag their feet, not put these little preconditions of, oh, Sudanese, we want you to solve your problems, then we will help you. The US should be lifting sanctions now without any precondition.
Hajooj, I don't think it's an overstatement to say that when Alex said that about lifting sanctions, your eyes almost lit up. What is it like? Yeah. What have these sanctions been like on Sudan?
I mean, Alex put it really well. Like, that was really a good way of doing it. I mean, to move forward, what is happening right now with the Sudanese economy, it's the economy is chained. The people from the old regime, people who were part of them, businessmen who were friends, at least friends with the ideology, they control it. And they control this very small economy. And by controlling that, they control all of us. And Hemeti uses his money to gain a lot of support and gain prestige and whatnot. So for us to move forward and to leave them behind, our economy needs to grow by 10 or 20 times, which I think is very easily done, because Sudan is so underdeveloped. It's so below its potential that what Alex said is the truth. Once the Prime Minister Hamdok is given the power to actually establish a solid economy and remove corruption and move the country forward with having like just a functioning banking system, the country will boom. We will have a boom for 10 years. That doesn't require a lot, but the sanctions is totally stopping him from doing this. And truthfully, if this continues for another 6 months and the dollar just keeps increasing in prices, then his government might actually face collapse economically. So it is very important, and that's something really important. One thing I want to add, though, on your question about unity that I want to talk about, because there is a unity that suddenly happened by the Prime Minister Hamdok going on air with the army, Burhan, and talking in this tagging way where Burhan started, then Hamdok talked a little bit, then Burhan came again, and suddenly there's this united enemy. So everybody's united around this enemy, which is the National Security Forces. So suddenly even the street is happy about this. The SPA, the Freedom for Change forces, everybody is just uniting against that. So suddenly we have this common enemy that we can all like throw our rocks at. And this unity is actually very rare in Sudan. It's very rare that we're able to do this. And it's been a while that we've been fighting among each other. So suddenly, again, we're fighting this common enemy. And I think this is important in moving forward. So this, to me, is the main thing that came out of this, is this unity among the forces fighting in Sudan.
Okay, Alex, let me follow up on something that Hajooj said. He said that he so agrees with you about how key it is for these sanctions to be removed that he thinks that this transition could collapse if it keeps going on this way, if the Prime Minister does not have really the power to try to boost up the economy. Do you think it's that precarious? Is that serious? And if so, why is the U.S. hesitant to do this?
I think it is that serious. I think what we've seen is the economy continuing its slide. You actually have not only a continuing erosion of living standards of the middle class and the salaried people in urban areas, but you have a developing food crisis, a potential humanitarian crisis on a very large scale in rural areas. And the Sudanese pound and the purchasing power of ordinary people is vanishing before their eyes. And it was the first slogan of the revolution was people holding up sticks of bread saying, we can't afford bread, down with the rule of thieves. And the thieves are still there. They're not in power, but they have a control over the economy. And unless that is cracked, there is a danger that the revolution will fail, a very real danger. Now, why isn't the US doing it? The US has just stuck to a business as usual approach. The sanctions are basically there for state sponsorship of terrorism. And in fact, ironically, even the ousted Omar Al Bachir regime cooperated very closely in counterterrorism with the United States. So those sanctions should have been lifted long ago. And the idea of keeping them in place under the current government, at the moment I hear that the US wants compensation to be paid for the victims of terrorist atrocities that were committed in the 1990s when Sudan was indeed a state sponsor of terror. Now, where is that money going to come from? The country is bankrupt, and it is actually once again the US, as it were, sending their man, our man, the Prime Minister Abdel Hamdok, into the boxing ring with his arms tied behind his back, saying, knock out the other guy and then we'll untie your arms. And it is simply a lack of political will, a lack of decent analysis on the part of the United States.
Hajooj, we're about out of time, but I'm going to let you have the last word. I'm assuming that perhaps did you ever think that you as a country would be at this point, and how much further do you think you can go?
I mean, the most amazing thing about this and what happened yesterday was, if you've seen in the street, people were up. The community of resistance were calling each other. We had a plan in case this was a coup, and people were so connected and they know their role as the protectors of this revolution, of moving it forward. So to me, this is amazing, and this is what is gonna help us reach a full civilian rule. Right now, we don't have a full civilian rule. So this is very exciting. We moved way further than what we thought we were at last year. So we're excited about it, and I think we have the power to move on and reach a full civilian rule. And I think there's an excitement about it, and there's a lot of engagement. There's a lot of citizen engagement, and that's the most amazing thing, and that's the thing that we always wanted. And now everybody is actively interacting with the government and being in the street.
All right. That will be the final word. Gentlemen, thank you both. Hajooj, Alex, thank you for the discussion. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. You can see the program again anytime. Go to our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Richelle, Carey, and the entire team, bye for now.